Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. I interview leaders, experts and business professionals from around the world who are bringing leadership principles and know-how into the digitally driven 21st century workplace, with focus firmly on the how-to rather than the what. Each episode is in aid of a charity chosen by my guests, and since 2020, we've made donations to over 80 global and local causes. Welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast with my guest Danny Wareham. Danny believes that happy bees make tasty honey. If you've got the right culture, leadership, support and strategy, then high performance becomes a side effect. He's an author and organisational psychologist who specialises in leadership, culture and personality, with particular focus on narcissism, psychopathy and Machiavellianism. Danny's book Constellation, Leadership Reimagined for a Connected Age, offers a groundbreaking study drawing on psychology, organisational science and fresh empirical evidence to reveal a revolutionary approach to leadership for a world too complex for hierarchies to keep pace. This is not a reworking of old leadership theories, it's a brand new map. He's also an accredited coach, psychometrician and a published academic researcher. Danny's clients include WorldPay, M&G Investment Bank, Lego and many more. This episode is in aid of the Hub Foundation, an independent and socially inclusive charity dedicated to supporting families and communities in creating happy, healthy school holidays. Danny, welcome to the Rethink Leadership podcast. Thanks for joining me. Please introduce yourself and your focus and passion on leadership.
Thank you, Jeremy. Lovely to be a guest. My name's Danny Wareham and I'm an organisational psychologist. My kind of underlying mantra is I do believe that happy bees make tasty honey. So if we have the right culture, the right strategy, the right direction and support, then performance is a side effect of that. And my passion around leadership as an organisational psychologist is twofold. One is, what are the social dynamics of the group? So how do people relate and what's the kind of engagement and culture? And the second is, what are our individual differences? So our sort of personalities and our default wiring, with a particular lens in leadership around what we call the dark triad. So narcissism, psychopathy and Machiavellianism, which get a bit of a bad rep, but aren't necessarily bad.
Got it. Thank you very much, Danny. That's a great introduction. We may dive into that later on, actually, and you can explain that a little bit more.
Okay.
You're of course you're also the author of the book Constellation, and maybe as an introduction into that, I can ask you a simple question: do we need a leader at the top?
The answer that you will get from any psychologist is always, it depends. So Constellation, strictly speaking, is it does not have a leader as a person, but that's not to say it is completely leaderless. So for example, if I were to ask who's the leader of your family, well, it will depend. You know, if it was directions, it might be my wife. If it was the Wi-Fi needs fixing, it might actually be one of the kids, because the context and the situation and the skills and competencies available determine who's possibly the best to step up to the plate and take on that sort of mantle that we might call leader. So my opening question in the book is, who leads when the leader's not in the room? And if you think about it, how often is your behavior kind of mandated and influenced by the boss versus how much is it influenced by the groups that you're a member of, you know, the people that you're around? And that's really what Constellation leadership is. I'm not advocating for getting rid of all leaders at all points, but there are times where, particularly in times of complexity and ambiguity, actually having culture take the driving wheel and culture become the leader that is much more suitable and a better performance driver as well.
Got it. And would I be right in saying that element then is what you call in the book the in-between spaces? And if so,
Yes.
Could you explain that?
Yes, exactly right. There's quite a few kind of case studies, because it might feel a little bit sort of John Lennon, you know, let's just hug and all get along and be a kind of socialist type view of leadership. I do argue that we're kind of wired this way, though, that instead of having a great man or a trait-based kind of approach to leadership, there are situations when we instinctively know who needs to step up to the plate. So if you take something as, I'm not a fan of sports analogies, but they do make useful metaphors. So during a football match, who is the leader? So I would argue that before the football match, you have traditional leadership. You have a vertical leadership. You have a manager that determines who's on the team, what's our tactics, what's our goal, literally. After the match, you also have a debrief. So you have your reward and recognition and your match playbacks and your tactics and all that kind of vertically leadership-driven conversation. During the match, you might have someone who has the badge or label of captain, but actually they're not barking orders or even influencing how the match is being played in terms of tactics, etc., because the goalkeeper knows how to be a goalkeeper and they'll never be asked to play out of position. And the winger knows how to be a winger and the striker knows how to be a striker. So because we know before the mission what is our intent and what is our motive, so where are we going and why are we going there, and everybody understands what they can contribute towards that sort of vision and North Star and intent, actually it liberates people to bring all of their tools and all of their contributing factors, even if they're not part of a traditional job description. So it's a very liberating form of leadership that I think you could argue that we're wired for as a social species as well.
Well, you are, as we talked off air, about talking my language, because I do believe in that power and potential of the many, and particularly when we consider the changing faces of our business, how digital is impacting our business, the speed of need for capability gain at all levels, which is actually setting apart some traditional leaders from some of the new breed leaders.
Yeah.
And you just can't do everything. And this is perhaps the time where, if your book Constellation was of most relevance, is possibly now. So are there any examples of organizations and leaders who've taken the core of what you're proposing in the book and made it work in reality?
Absolutely. When I wrote the book, I was very conscious that, first of all, there wasn't any research into completely leaderless leadership. So that was a little bit of a shock, because to me it feels a little bit second nature. However, I'm also cautious that I'm quite idealistic, and I didn't want the book to be this kind of all theory and no kind of substance or practicality. So the way the book's set out is the first section is very much around how did we get here? What do we think leadership as culture is, psychological safety, etc. The middle section is here's the research in an accessible way. And the third section is, don't take my word for it, here's some organizations that already use it and have been using it for years. They just don't call it Constellation Leadership, and this is how you apply it. And a very simple but effective example might be, there's an organization in Manchester that is a SaaS software development company. And traditionally, software development companies tend to use a project methodology called Agile. And how Agile works is it's a form of traditional distributed leadership. So you have a product owner that owns the kind of overall project, and they have this is what the customer wants as the output. You then have a semi-autonomous team that's distributed, that will go into a room, a metaphorical room, and work through a to-do list and develop the changes, the bug fixes and feature developments under the support of a servant leader called a Scrum Master. Now, ultimately, you still have the product manager, the product owner, that is the overall leader, but it's almost a devolved form of distributed leadership whilst Agile's going on. This SaaS company uses that process. And traditionally, that takes either 2 to 4 weeks to go through that cyclical work through your to-do list. This organization got rid of Scrum Masters. So there is no leader in the Scrum at all. It also enabled them to run their Scrums much faster. So their sprint section of their Scrum that normally takes 2 to 4 weeks, they can do it in under a week. And that gives them a huge competitive edge when you can release bug fixes and features and things that your customers are asking for 4 times as quick as your competitors. Because you've taken the brakes off, because everybody in the room knows what they bring to the table, they know what they're working towards, and they understand the implicit rules of how do we get things done around here. They, from a motivational point of view, they feel that they belong, they make a difference, and they're seen, and the output is a better quality at a faster speed. And this company is one, it's been the fastest growing SaaS company in the northwest of England 4 years in a row. So that's a very practical thing. Now, it does bring with it some other challenges. When there's that speed of change, there's so many changes, so many new product features coming out. It introduces a much more focus around communications. How do you tell your customers all of these benefits? How do you keep your workforce involved with all of the speed and rate of change? But the the benefits far outweigh the risks that come with it if you can create the culture that allows you to bring all of those skills to the table and contribute towards something purposefully.
Yeah, that makes sense with what you said before, actually, as well, with um, building that purpose and culture within the context that you are, to then be able to go faster, bigger, better, all of
Yeah.
those kind of things. And agile as a mindset really is in many ways cultural, if you can link it in that way.
Yes.
So you used a tech firm, so maybe this is an unfair question, but was it that mindset is shifted into non-tech companies as well, supported by processes like design thinking, let's
Yeah.
say. Um, how has it helped non-tech companies in the same way that it's helped this SaaS company in Manchester?
The it doesn't matter what your business is, all businesses are people businesses. And culture is a social phenomenon around people. So all we're saying is if you are able to articulate why are we here and why does it matter, and create an environment that allows people to purposely contribute towards that, then actually the model applies to lots of different areas. The army have used this for nearly 200 years. They call it mission command. And it's used in everything from what you might think as military incursions through to if you do a parade, a horse guards parade, where they just have the horses out and they wave to the king. They use exactly the same methodology and approach of why are we here and why does it matter, so that when things don't go to plan, people don't have to go up and down a chain of command and get sign off in triplicate to make a decision, because we know what we're here to achieve and why we're achieving it. So there is a form of autonomy within it. And the case studies we've looked at, from cooperatives to esports, professional esports, to companies like Ted Anders CDL, who use customer feedback, live customer feedback continuously, so that their feedback effectively becomes the leader and the North Star that they're working towards. So it works across industries wherever there's people. It doesn't necessarily work for all situations all the time, and you do still need traditional leadership, vertical leadership models at certain points. Just like before the football match, you have vertical leadership before and after. So I'm not advocating for getting rid of leaders, but when you're dealing with ambiguity and dealing with complexity, then allowing culture to drive the behaviours and help towards that success has proven to be successful in many, many different industries.
Well, and that goes right back to your analogy of the football team, actually, is that if things aren't going well in a match, the players are still on the pitch,
Mm-hmm.
but the manager at that point can make some tactical changes, can change the face of the game, but then it's still down to the people. So it's like,
Yeah,
without panicking,
yeah,
can still do
and there's no,
leadership in the right way, right?
yeah, we know why we're here. I mean, we're recording this now at the end of January, and there's some horrendous things in the news around Minneapolis at the moment with immigration control, and we can see Constellation leadership happening there, where the local residents, they don't have a central figurehead who's telling people what to do, but they've self-organized around a very clear purpose of we don't want this happening in our neighborhoods, and everybody is contributing how they can contribute. So not because my job description or the expectation of me is X, Y, or Z, but because I'm physically fit, so I can go and stand outside in -20 and with my whistle and warn people. So how can you be you? What do you bring to the table in pursuit of this overall goal, so that you don't need a central figurehead saying "follow me"?
Yeah, so maybe if we just put the shoe on the other foot here then, and I'm thinking of um different competitive environments here, Danny, like fintech, investment banking, high compliance industries, maybe like healthcare, pharma in some areas.
Yeah.
So you've got a combination of compliance and sort of that dog eat dog, and we've got to get it,
Yeah.
hedge funds, whatever you want to call it. So how does the constellation approach, if you like, help leaders actively create a culture even in those environments where people feel empowered, supported, safe to collaborate, communicate, celebrate each other's wins without also in a dog eat dog world feeling that they're losing power themselves?
Yes. If I have to make my light shine a little bit brighter by dimming someone else's, I'll answer I'll answer it in two ways. First of all, so I'm going to answer the reverse first. So in banking, for example, there is a huge amount of regulation, a huge amount of instruction, and a huge amount of words that organizations say about what, we put the customer at the heart of everything we do, and things like this. That might be just performative, I would say. However, you still get pressure sales, mis-selling, high risk, financial crash, not 15 years ago. So you already have a culture that, despite what the leader supposedly says, and despite what the regulations and the processes and policies and protocols around you say, how we really do things around here, which is driven by the culture, is already delivering disadvantageous, maladaptive behaviors, we shall say. So that is constellation leadership. It's just being used in the wrong way. It's being used to drive bad performance and nefarious behaviors. So it's already happening. The idea of using it positively, though, is how do you realign it so you can be very clear and articulate, why are we here? What are we here to achieve? And a lot of organizations struggle because they don't know that. So if you had a banking organization and they say, we are going to be a safe pair of hands for our investors and guaranteed to be the best returns on the market, for argument's sake, that's absolutely great. That's fine. I'm not here to kind of argue or diminish your mission, but culture leaves evidence. So let's go and have a look through your organization and see if you're really walking your talk. And in a constellation model, the responsibility for accountability, for holding people to those red lines, becomes shared across the system as well, which also means praise, and that do we have a dog eat dog mentality or not is also shared as well. So it's not a panacea for fixing all problems, but if you don't have that clarity of what are we aligning behaviors to, people bring their own agendas, people bring their own motives. Even with the best of intentions, bad behaviors can happen. So that was a long meandering answer of saying it does work, but it has to have intentionality behind what are we here to achieve and how do we really get things done around here. And if you're not clear how we get things done around here can work against you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And it also strikes me, though, that there's a fundamental mindset shift at board and executive leader level that has to happen first so that the climate and conditions can be put in place so constellation leadership can thrive. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Though I would argue that's the case with any leadership style as well. The biggest challenge I've seen in cultural change initiatives is the delta between your walk and your talk. We are, as a species, we are acutely attuned to spot signs of incongruency and a lack of safety. So if you say, I had a client who was very big on employee well-being. So they had 5 pillars in their strategy, and 3 of them were around employee. One was around employee well-being, one was around mental health, one was around employee loyalty and tenure. So they say they're about employee, but unintentionally their canteen only sold yellow food. They only had chips and pies. They had massage chairs. It was a 1,000-seater contact center. They had massage appointments, but they only did 4 a month. Their budget cycles mean that they announce their redundancies every year in World Mental Health Week. Now, none of these things are done intentionally, but if you say you're about X, but the lived experience on a cold, wet Tuesday, as we say in Stoke, is Y, The difference between what you say and what you do, that's where toxicity can come in at an individual level, because you're now asking me, I signed up for this, and that psychological contract is broken, and you're now asking me to behave in a way that's incongruent with my values. In some industries, this might be more acute. So particularly there's high extrinsic rewards, such as banking and the incentivization. But ultimately, for me, traditional leaders' roles is, how do you minimize that delta so that you walk your talk? Do you do what you say you're going to do?
Yeah, I was writing a note as you were saying there, is that you've got to think through it first to be able to act with relevant intention.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're in danger of going off the rails, or being led by your own kind of mindset or opinions rather
And
than
everybody
principles.
is, if you assume positive intent, nobody comes to work wanting to do a bad job. And that includes senior leadership. So we're doing things because we feel they're right. Nobody at the post office thought they were doing anything wrong. Nobody at Boeing thought they were doing anything wrong. But bad jobs happen, bad things do happen. So the question is not what's the behavior, what's causing that behavior, what's normalizing that behavior. If you have a dodgy salesperson and you focus on the behavior, then you end up with processes around, let's claw back commission, or let's have a disciplinary process. But if you get to the point where that person is dismissed and you haven't fixed what was normalizing the behavior, the next person just adopts the unwritten rules of the culture. So how, instead of thinking of culture as something that's about creating a great place to work, think of it as a strategic tool that helps create a place where great work is done. And that requires intentionality.
Yes, understood. Thanks. I also, bringing the conversation down a bit, I also learned a new term, yellow food, which I'd not come across before. But now you say it, chips, pies,
Yeah, yellow
fried,
food.
whatever.
Yeah,
Totally get it. Yeah, is
yeah.
that a Stoke thing as well?
No, I think that's one of the ways that I process the world is I spot patterns in random things, and I remember seeing in their canteen they'd got a penne pasta thing, they'd got pies and pasties, they'd got a chicken curry on, and they'd got chips on, and and I was like, everything is yellow. It's like you can call it beige food if you want, but everything was just, that was the commonality that I saw between them.
I think that's your next book. Honestly, yeah.
Beige,
Oh no, I like yellow. Yellow is the new beige.
just
Yeah,
yellow.
we
Yes.
are, yeah. Um, just before we close the conversation, I wanted to pick up something that you mentioned right at the beginning in your
Mhm.
introduction. You talked about some old school leader traits that I kind of know very well: narcissism,
Yeah.
psychopathy, Machiavellianism,
Machiavellianism. Yeah.
etc. But you said actually that's that can lead down a darker path, but it's not always negative.
Mhm.
Can you just go into that a little bit further for us and talk about that, and particularly maybe for those people tuning in that know leaders, know some of these old school leaders, what are the small pivots that leaders like this can make to sort of bring more of the positive out of it, as well as sort of fulfill themselves as a leader?
Yeah. So try and keep this as succinct as possible, because personality is a fascinating subject. Personality, we now know, is partly genetic. So anything that is genetic tends to always have a positive to it at some point. So if we take something less controversial, if you take extroversion, there are some facets within personality extroversion, like activity. So I can't sit still, I've got ants in my pants, I've got to be busy all the time. Gregariousness, so how spontaneous and happy and joyful are you? Now, if you have those traits and you're at a funeral, those could lead to bad behaviors. You could be laughing and joking and having fun at a funeral. So there are no bad personality traits. It's the context that determines if they're bad. Narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism are exactly the same. There are benefits to them sometimes and not others. So psychopathy, in its simplest sense, is, can you separate emotion from rationality? So can you make tough decisions? If I have an accident and I need a surgeon, I hope my surgeon is a psychopath, because the ability to focus on the task and not think of me as a person, that is a superpower in that moment. I also hope they're not my partner, because that's a different context. Narcissism tends to be used as a pejorative. We tend to think of, potentially presidents, because we talk about the maladaptive personality disorder end, but it's a spectrum. And actually, narcissism is about the need to be seen, the need to be recognized. So do you like being told, well done? Some people like it more than others. That's a form of part of trait narcissism. Are you optimistic? Are you able to bounce back when things go wrong? These are narcissistic traits. It's only when they get to the high end and the context demands that they're bad. And Machiavellianism is about strategic manipulation of others. But at the lower levels, the subclinical levels, it becomes about, can you inspire others? Do you have charisma? So in terms of leadership, we recruit actively for people that have optimistic personalities, that are able to make tough decisions and can inspire others to follow. Now, that's not to say that those are always virtues. Narcissistic leaders, at what point does your grit and determination make other people less important? I'm special, I don't have to follow the rules. Well, that's a bad thing when you're in a regulated industry like banking. Psychopathy, I have no qualms about laying off 14,000 people because they're just a number on a spreadsheet. I don't have the emotional connection. So there are pros and cons with every personality trait. So again, I could talk on this for hours, but is there anything in there that's piqued your interest? Or is there a specific boss you've had in the past that you think, I can attach this label, or I perceive this label to be, to them?
I'm looking in the mirror.
Are you optimistic?
Yeah. I'm active, optimistic, I bounce back, I like change, but I get the continuum. I get that now. And you read John Ronson's psychopath test?
Yes.
But yeah, you reminded me of that a little bit when you were talking about that. And that's when I first read about the continuum piece of it. And so I can see the positive sides when you need that. And I can more readily see the downsides, particularly. I mean, you mentioned Minnesota, when you've got a leader at the top who's demonstrating probably some of those darker traits, you see the impacts of what's happening. But I get that. It's a really good intro. Yeah, I think it's a completely different conversation going down there. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should come back and we will have a
full one on narcissism.
On narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism, if I can pronounce it next time as well.
Yes.
So we'll do that. But until then, Danny, thank you very much for joining me today. So let's just go back a step. How do people get hold of your book, Constellation? How do they find out more how you can help them and connect?
The book is available in all bookshops. Obviously, not all carry stocks. You might have to ask for it, but it's available around the world. Waterstones, Foyles, Barnes & Noble, etc. And of course on Amazon around the world too. You can get it if you Google or go to constellationleadership.co.uk. It will take you to a page that has access to all of those. To get hold of me, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you can also find me either at dannywareham.com or at Firgun, which is my consultancy, Firgun.
Great. Well, thank you very much indeed. I've learned a lot. I'm slightly more worried than when we started the conversation now, but I'm going to go. That's another conversation that we're promising coming up now. But some great points to take away. Danny Wareham, thanks for joining me.
Been an absolute pleasure, Jeremy. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Rethink Leadership podcast with me, Jeremy Blaine. Please like, comment and support us on your favourite platform, and subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can watch as well as listen to each episode.